right, so I think we can go ahead and get started. So today we're talking about how we budget for rehabs and flips. So if you're new here, we definitely like the participation, especially in the chat. If you've got a really complicated question, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. But we're kind of leaving that up to each individual to manage themselves. Before we get started, we just want to make a quick disclaimer. So obviously this isn't going to be an exact science, right? But we want to try to fill in the gaps as best as possible. And we hope that you guys can bring some questions to the table as well. And there's really no such thing as a stupid question. So if you have one, just go ahead and ask it and we'll go ahead and try our best to answer them. So you want to go ahead and start it off here?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about coming up with a budget on a remodel project. So, you know, I this is actually a really common question, I think. I think everybody asks this whenever they talk to me about this. So, I don't really have a method or a it's like you said, there's no exact science to this. For the longest time, I was really under budgeting on these and constantly going over budget. And it wasn't until maybe in the last year and a half where I kind of got it down a little bit better, where I'm only getting it down better because I'm still adding, you know, a good amount on top of what I think it's going to cost. And that's how I'm falling within the budget. So
I think we actually have a joke about this. So we'll walk through our house and we'll say, okay, this is what we think it's going to cost. Now we're going to double it.
Right. Well, not double it as much anymore. I think we're a little closer than that now, but that was true for a while, actually. But when I started doing this, I could do a cosmetic remodel, and that's cosmetic. Right? Let's break that down first, actually.
Yeah, a lot of people misunderstand what we mean by cosmetic. So, yeah.
When I talk about a cosmetic remodel, I'm talking about your flooring, the doors and trim, the kitchen cabinets, the appliances,
the countertops,
and something in the bathroom, right?
Yeah.
And paint inside and out.
Yeah.
And that alone, that's what I'm talking about cosmetic.
We're not deleting a wall. We're not adding an addition.
Right. Nothing huge. I'm not even, cosmetic, you're not even doing water heaters or HVAC, not doing a roof, stuff like that. So just purely the stuff you're looking right at when you walk into the house.
Painting the exterior, landscaping.
Exactly. So that kind of stuff, when I started, we could finish that within $20,000 to $25,000 on your average, entry level home.
So tell us how long ago this was, too.
Yeah, I guess it's been a while. This is like 2015, probably, right? So, but even at that time, most people were spending about twice that. And the only reason I was able to do it is I was constantly trying to find deals on material, and that's everywhere. I'm looking on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist, and just spending so much time nickel and diming all the little bits and pieces that add up. That and at this point, where we are right now, is a lot of that stuff stolen anyway. So it's just I kind of decided I don't want to buy from these guys anymore. And it got to a point where they didn't look like they were thieves back then, right? This is just people who had extra stuff, maybe, who knows. But at this point, it's clearly stolen, and you buy stuff from these guys on the street corner, they're going to follow you back to your job site and steal it right back. So I don't buy any of that stuff that way these days. Pretty much everything just is bought from Lowe's or Home Depot for the most part. But more importantly, even if it's not stolen, it's just leftover material from some, homeowner's job somewhere. It could take so much time just to do that, right?
Yeah.
It's not worth all the effort. I'd rather pay more money on the remodel and spend less time trying to, put all this stuff together and save a few dollars. I think we talked about that lots of times in lots of application. But so these days, just a general, quick cosmetic job, you're probably looking at $50,000 to $60,000 on a median price home, South King County area, right? So we're not doing high-end stuff. We're not doing high-end appliances or stuff like that. Now,
we're like the meat and potatoes real estate people, I think, right? We're generally focusing on median or below.
Right.
We're generally not focusing on high end.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Right. And so, I mean, we're not buying really expensive appliance sets that are 10, 15,000 or plus. We're just buying the normal, I wouldn't say builder grade stuff, but I guess it's kind of like that.
I think we're maybe a little bit better than builder stuff. I mean, but
right. So that's what we're talking about right now. So I guess to get into it, how are we determining these budgets, right? So for me personally, I've done dozens of these remodels at this point.
Yeah.
So I feel confident walking into the house.
I think you've done more than a dozen. But
yeah, a few. Yeah, I've done enough. Where you're walking in the house, looking at everything. I know what I'm looking for just instinctively at this point. I know what could potentially cause problems if I see something, right? Where I feel like just starting out, you're not going to know that. So the first thing I suggest, the first thing I can say actually is, at least for me, this is something I have to learn by doing, right? I can't learn this out of a book or anyone telling me, which that's just, I guess, maybe my learning style. I have to do it over and over and over again before I kind of figure out, okay, this is what this is going to cost. And
not be afraid to make mistakes too.
Right, exactly. And we have that liberty a lot of times to do that, where we can risk a few $1,000s doing this or that, where maybe some people can't. But I think we're all here as investors looking at either rentals or flip property. Sometimes, and if you haven't done it a lot, or if you're relatively new, I think maybe you do need to try things just so you can kind of figure out what works and what doesn't for you. Because something that doesn't work for me or that does work for me might be different for somebody else. So I guess trying things and dipping your toes in and getting your feet wet is the number one, first and foremost way you're going to be able to start figuring this out.
Not being afraid to try new people, right?
Right.
Yeah, and there's always going to be inherent risks.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes the people who have done really well for us have been just new people who have just been really hungry and they want to do a good job and they want to build that long-term relationship.
Right.
Versus, I mean, we've had plenty of people who are supposed to be established completely drop off the face of the earth, right? Mm-hmm. But we've got that margin built in where we're going to be okay if something goes a little sideways.
Right.
We obviously don't prefer that to happen, and there's been plenty of instances where we've had to pay for the same job twice, maybe even three times. But
at least
it happens occasionally, right? And we can't be afraid of that.
Right. So another thing I would say is, I know we're supposed to try and save as much money as possible doing these, maximizing profit as much as possible, but I think first and foremost, if you look at this project as not that I'm going to make as much money as possible, but I'm going to put together a quality product, then that a lot of times will sort a lot of the little things, that little hits of the little issues that we come across doing this throughout the project.
I'm actually going to put a little asterisk on that though, where we have to distinguish the fact that we are not living in the house though.
Right.
So that's the line though, right?
Right. That's true. Yeah. We're not living there.
What you might find unacceptable in a house that you're living in,
right?
It'll pass on a flip or a rehab or investment property.
Right. I mean, provided it's just stuff's not falling apart.
Yeah.
Stuff's not leaking the second you're done working on it.
We want to provide a quality product, but we're not going to critique this stuff to death, right?
Right. I mean, when you have a $450,000 house, we're not going to go for level 5 smooth wall drywall, right? That's kind of or Venetian plaster. That's kind of what you're getting at, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But no. So, the mistake I've made for a long time, and I'm just now breaking out of it, is trying to have the lowest cost labor, right? I always feel like, well, not as much now. We've talked about that in previous Zoom meetings. I've always tried to make up for the cost that we paid too much on the house with paying less for labor. And it just doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
And what comes along with the cheap labor is just so much other baggage that you're going to be spending so much time babysitting these people, where I'd rather pay someone qualified and someone good more money just to do it without me having to just constantly stop by every day to make sure that they're there and doing the job, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess when you get down to it, I would say you can expect to spend anywhere between $300 and as much as $500 per day on your workers being in the property if these are qualified people. So when I say qualified people, I don't think that having a license and being bonded alone makes you qualified. There's no barrier to entry to get a general contractor license in this state. Well, I'm a general contractor, right? And only because I have to be by law when we're flipping houses. But it doesn't mean I know how to do anything. Like, I can't go into the house by myself and start doing the work because I know what I'm doing. I know how to do a lot of this in theory at this point. I know how to look at them doing the work and decide if they're doing it wrong or not, but I can't tell you why, right? So I can't go and do this stuff on my own.
Yeah.
But I'm hiring subcontractors, and a lot of this might sound like no-brainer stuff, but it's not. I see everyone making a lot of these mistakes where you're going to hire people, number one, they have to have their own tools, right?
Yeah.
If they do not have their tools, then they're not qualified, period. And I don't care what the reason is or what they're going to say. If they don't have tools, they're not doing my job. That's just what it comes down to, right? Where there's just, and you'd be surprised if you haven't done this before, but there's so many people say they're contractors and know how to do things. They don't even have a hammer, they don't have a tape measure, whatever it is, right?
Yep.
And I'm not going to go buy tools up front for this. Number two, they have to have their own transportation, right? So, and I don't know why this is so rampant in this industry too, where so many of these people don't have a way to get to the job, right?
Yeah.
And 2 or 3 years ago, I would be, okay, well, why don't we do it this way for you? Or why don't you borrow my truck? Or why don't you borrow my tools? Well, it doesn't work out. It never works out. You might only being charged $150 or even $100 for the day of the labor.
Yeah.
But there's a reason why they don't have a car or a truck, and there's a reason why they don't have tools. So now I will say I've tried to give several people their start this way, and out of maybe 20 times, maybe one person might be worth all the effort, right? Whereas most of the other ones, they just take advantage of the time and they milk the time being there and they get hardly anything done. Or they do things in a way that just makes everything worse. So I wouldn't recommend doing that. If you are starting these projects, especially right now with interest rates being higher, meaning our holding costs are going to be higher, right? Yep. We don't have time to waste 2 or 3 months with someone or with a group of people who don't even know what they're doing. So just budget for $300 to $500 per day for labor only, right?
Yeah.
But that's going to get you a higher quality person. But I'll put an asterisk on that too. Paying more hasn't always been something that paid off either. When I was having issues with some of these project delays and having to redo work, I'm a person of extremes, right? So I give these guys $50 or $100 a day to, okay, I'm going to give this guy $600 every single day, and he's going to do it perfect. He's going to do it fast. Well, it didn't work out that way either, right?
Yeah.
We can't blindly throw money at the problem.
Yeah.
Right? You have to actually be a part of this process. So I'm stopping by any project we've got at least once or twice a week, right? At this point, it's not babysitting. I'm making sure that there's actual progress happening, right?
You're taking on the role of the project manager.
Yes. Yeah.
And maybe this is an okay time to pause, but I think what we're finding is there are a lot of skilled people that know how to do this stuff and yet have zero imagination on how to put it together.
Right.
Right? And so that's something that's an issue that we've encountered lots of times, and so we've got to be there, we've got to be watching, and it's not micromanaging them,
right?
But it's just making sure that our vision is being played out, right?
I'll bring up an example of what you're talking about. It's more often than not, the guys will do something silly like there'll be a doorbell, for example, right outside the main door. There's a doorbell. I like bigger trim than the standard trim. So I said, put the bigger trim around the door. Now, rather than move the doorbell over, they notch around the doorbell. So you put the trim and then there's a notch and there's a doorbell and it just looks like shit. I'm like, at what point did you
I'd rather just not have a doorbell.
Right. How did you sit there and think that this is okay? Especially at a time where stuff's all open up and we can move whatever we want, right?
And I think we've had that happen easily 10 times.
Oh, it happens constantly.
It happens like almost every single house.
It's not always a
and
doorbell.
Pisses me off.
But
Yeah,
it's
and it's
something
some
done.
version of that, right?
Right. You cut the edge of the wall plate on a light switch, for example,
Yeah.
rather than move the light switch over. That's a big one.
We actually have a question here too.
Yeah.
So what about specialized tools? Are you okay with contractors having to get those, and who gets billed for them? So I might have a version of this answer as well, but I'll let you go first.
So it kind of depends on the job. So me personally, I had a lot of different subs I was working with, but right now I only have a couple who I have two in particular that use my tools when they're needed. But I have these specialized tools. I have enough tools at this point we can build a whole goddamn house from ground up probably. And that's the concrete tools, that's everything. I got all this
tractor.
stuff. Tractor, yeah. But I don't think they should be billing us for tools. If I hire a general contractor, that's on them to figure out the tools, right? Whether they rent them or whether they buy it or whether they have it already. I'm not going to hire a general contractor and then have him tell me he's going to bill me for the tool. No, you're billing me for the labor, right? And that needs to be built in. Now, that being said, I'm not hard line on anything. I guess it really comes down to a case by case. If there's let me think about it for a second of an example. If we needed I guess we needed a demo saw once, a big concrete cutting saw. We had to cut into a few things that way. I bought one. Well, no, I rented one first. I rented it first, and I could have bought one for like a few $100s more.
Yeah.
So I ended up buying it, and now I own it. And whenever we need a cutoff saw or a demo saw, we've got it. But I think for the most part, they need to have their own stuff. At least their own basic, hammers and drills and saws and all that. Like if they have less of a variety of stuff than I do, then they probably are not that, maybe they're not that experienced, or they might not be the right person for the job. So, no, I guess that's not a really good answer. I guess it's really case by case.
Yeah, I mean, it's case by case, and I think you brought a good point where there have been instances where we rented a tool, but it would have just cost the same amount to just go out and buy it, right?
Right, and that's why we bought a tractor.
Yeah, so like the tractor, they've got 84-month no interest financing on it.
Yeah.
Our payments, with all the attachments, I mean, the tractor costs more than my car, right?
Yeah.
With all the attachments and everything included with it. And I think our payment on it's $700 a month. If we went out and rented that with all the attachments, it costs way more than that.
It costs more than that for a day with everything.
Right. And so, we've replaced enough sewer lines, we've done enough landscaping, where it's just worth having it. And then we go ahead and depreciate it or write it off, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's, case by case, but I think that was a good question nonetheless.
We got another question here. Ryan's an electrician, for those you don't know Ryan. Specialized tools for a particular job should be factored into the quote. Yeah, I agree. And like I said, it's kind of case by case. If not, it should be discussed and left up to the hiring person to determine if they want to reimburse. Okay, that's kind of more what we were talking about already, case by case. Are you physically checking out flips and keeping up with the progress? If so, how often? Yes, I am checking at least once a week. Generally, it's depending on the project. Like there's some where I go to a lot more frequently. Like those of you who are familiar with the Wonder Park property I got, I was there constantly.
You were there sometimes 2 times a day.
Yeah, I was there always. I lived there for a little bit, but it was a very special case. But no, at least once a week where they're working, so I can at least be judging and gauging the progress where they're at before I hand out a progress payment, for example.
Yeah.
So the sink that collapsed in my rental. Yeah, so this is a great example, actually. I had a countertop installer who has done, I don't know how many projects for me or how many jobs for me. Several, at least a dozen projects where everything was fine. The guy worked for one of the cabinet shops or 2 of the cabinet shops, and all he did was install countertops. Well, suddenly, for some reason, he started kind of just becoming unreliable, right? And so much so that I just stopped working with him. And after that was done, he had already done, several countertops in the span of about a month for me. And it just so happened 2 or 3 of the sinks on these countertops just fell down, like out of nowhere, and that happened to like 3 different houses within the same
Like
2
the
week
same
period.
time, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess his work was kind of slacking, and I didn't know that, right?
Yeah.
But now I can look back and think about when I see some things. Yeah, it seemed like he was slacking. He was not showing up. He was begging for money before jobs were done. That's actually another indicator that something's wrong. He was, and then when I look back now, there's things that I noticed that weren't done very well. Like we use a 2 cm countertop. It's cheaper than the 3 cm, but you're supposed to have a plywood underneath these countertops, right? And that helps support everything. He didn't do any of the plywood. He didn't secure the sinks properly, right? He didn't use the brackets and all that stuff you're supposed to use, and all these little things that I can think back on now that I didn't really think about at the time, because I'm like, oh, he's fine. He's done several of these for me already, and lo and behold, here we are. They're falling apart right in front of my eyes. So, yeah, if people are constantly just never have any money, even after you pay them, a couple days later, I need money. It's an indicator that it's either a drug problem, or it's a gambling problem, and I've had
or an alcohol problem.
In the contracting world, the construction world, it seems like there's always one of 3 issues. It's one of 4 issues: marital problems or family issues, which that could happen to anybody. But
sure.
the big 3, they're either alcoholics, they're drug addicts, or they're gamblers, right? And it's even worse when they're a combination of any of those 3. So that's always an issue with people when they start falling off.
So do you think that it's better to hire a contractor? I guess what I'm trying to ask is, when you're getting a bid, is it better to get a bid for that whole job, or pay them per day, per week, or whatever that looks like?
So you got to be careful on how you do this, because if you start paying per day or per week, they can consider it a wage, right?
And they could really milk the clock.
Right. But more importantly, when you're paying a wage, as far as the state's concerned, you're responsible for L&I costs and payroll costs and all that too. So unless you want to hire them as an employee, which that depends on however you want to have your stuff set up, you need to be paying on a bid, right? Now I pay progress payments on that bid, right? And that's the kind of how I'm doing that. Because I don't want to have an employee, right? I don't want all the costs associated with an employee, for one, and for 2, I don't like hourly employees in a lot of this stuff, because it just takes longer, right? And it's harder to budget for these jobs when you're paying hourly. You don't know necessarily when it's going to end, right? Now, at this point, I have a fairly good idea of how long a job should take, but it's only because however many of these we've done already, right? So my suggestion, especially when you're newer, up front, is get a total cost of labor, get a total cost of material. Now, I don't generally do labor and material bids. I want to know what they're charging for labor, right? I generally pay for material, usually through a phone sale or however. When they go to the store, I pay for it over the phone for contractor sales. So labor and material should be close to about 50-50, right? And then if you're around there, and it doesn't have to be exact, but if you're close to that 50-50 ratio, then you're probably doing okay as far as how much they're charging for labor, right? Now, obviously some material have gone up a lot, right? So it might throw that off a little bit. Some particular jobs are more labor intensive. That might throw that off a little bit. But overall, on your flip, if you're about 50-50 labor and material, then you know you did okay.
Yeah, and then I think on the other end of that spectrum too, I think you've got to be really careful about paying someone a lot of money up front or all at once. We've heard of the nightmare stories, right?
We hear it every day.
We hear it every day. Someone pays $100,000 or $200,000 even for a job, and then the contractor disappears, right?
Right.
And so I think you've got to be careful of that as well. But I think we've found a good balance, though. I think
I don't pay anything up front. Period. That's just how. If you can't afford gas to get here, then you're not working my job. Is kind of my thought process now, and I've seen too many people get ripped off this way. A friend of ours actually had a house burned down. Insurance paid out, what was it, like $300,000. They gave it to them. Just gave it to the homeowners, all of it. Said, here you go rebuild your house. They gave it to the contractor, all of it. and he disappeared. And then he filed for bankruptcy on his LLC. So what can you do, right?
Right.
You're just screwed at that point. But
Right.
no, I don't pay anything up front, and it's I know I'm not going anywhere. That's kind of what I'm thinking, is I'm not going anywhere. This house isn't going anywhere. So you can start working, or you can not, and I don't care. If you don't want to do it, then don't do it. I'll have somebody else, right? And now, that being said, again, I'm not hard line on everything, right?
Yeah.
If there's
You've got to have some discretion.
if there's something reasonable, like if they're about to go do some huge particular job, I don't know what it is. Let's just say they're going to do the roof. I'll go buy the roofing material, right?
Yeah.
I'll pay for and that's why I like labor and material bids separate, right? I don't want someone getting a big draw on labor and they haven't done anything yet.
Yeah.
But as a general rule of thumb, I don't like paying for anything up front. So I don't like giving any deposit or anything. I understand if someone is brand new to working with me, we might have to work something out there, but for the most part, I don't want to pay anything up front. So I'd rather they put a lien on the house while they start working, right? Which that's common too. I don't know if it's the right words for it, but there's paperwork you do when you work with a new general contractor a lot of times where they put some sort of lien on the property, and it gets released when the work is done and when they're paid, right? So that I'd rather do rather than give them a big 50% up now and half when they're done.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not doing it. Even if I pay something up front, it's not half. There's no way I'm doing that because too many people run off.
Yeah, and we've heard of instances too, and I think I'm positive it's happened to us too, where more material was bought than needed, and then they return it and they pocket it too.
Yeah, or they just keep the material. I mean, that happens. And I chalk it up now to as education, right? Like anything else, where it comes with some of the lower paid or the lower bidding guys, where I'll have a whole 100 pieces of siding where they'll just go home with it, right? Or I'll have 4 or 5 rolls of wire left over. That's $1,000 right there, and they go home with it. So stuff like that, or they just go and buy stuff because they know when they phone sale for me, I'm not going to question it. I get an idea and I get the receipt, but am I really going to go back and look at it versus the job they did? Probably not. I'm just going to log it with the bookkeeper and then call it a day. So, but fortunately, a couple people I do have are fiercely loyal to me, and they tell me about these things when they see it. So and sometimes I catch it too. I don't say much, and I'm the kind of person, I'm not going to go cause a scene and fight with these guys. I'll pay you, and then you go on your way, and I'm never going to hire you again. That's what I'd rather do than go like, you're stealing this and you're stealing that. Forget it. It's already gone. It's sunk cost, and fine. If I'm glad that it happened over $500 worth of stuff now rather than thousands of dollars later, right? So that's my thought on that. So we got another question here. If the contractor's including materials in their bid, do you at least pay for that so they start? And I think that's going to depend on what they're doing, right? Like kind of what I said earlier. If they're doing the roof, I might buy the roofing material and have it delivered, right? Or if they're doing siding, I might buy the siding and have it delivered, right? I'll pay for paint up front when the painter comes and paints, stuff like that. So I have no problem paying for material when I know it's going to material and when I know it's going to be delivered to the property. But as far as a lot of people are trying to do half now, half at completion, and I'm not going to do that.
What do you think? What do you think is the biggest challenge when getting these? I guess what I'm trying to ask is like when you're like beyond the bid, right? Like when you're in the thick of it, what do you think has been the biggest challenge for us?
I'd say, even really good guys that we've worked with have disappeared in the middle of a job, right? And this is also something common that we see a lot with a lot of investors and flippers, where someone doing a great job just decides one day they're not going to show up anymore, and for whatever reason, right? Maybe they have issues at home, or maybe they got into have a drug problem all of a sudden, or maybe they just don't want to do the job anymore. That's actually a good point right there. There's been several times when someone has bid me something, I've agreed to it, they do about half it, and then they just walk off because they don't think they're getting paid enough. When all they have to do is tell me,
Yeah.
And I would have been, I'm like, that's, you want an extra $500 for the, fine, I'll pay it, right?
Yeah.
At least that way I know. But rather than just say nothing, and I don't know what it is, because it seems to be a pretty common problem where it went from me pushing too hard to go lower, right?
Yeah.
Where guys were kind of turned off by it, and I got a reputation for being cheap. And then it went from I'm just going to pay whatever they ask me, right?
Yeah.
So people were asking me for this amount, fine, and they don't feel like they're getting paid enough. So I think open communication is important, right? That's another reason why going to your job sites on a regular basis is helpful, where you see stuff going on. Right, they might be like, I had to do all this extra stuff and this and this and this. I'm like, all right, fine. How long do you think it took? Do you want this much for it? And then that's all it takes sometimes. Rather than you're not showing up at all, they're doing all this extra work, and then they're pissed off that they're like, this shit took me way longer than I expected it to.
Yeah, and I think that to a certain extent, people just want, and maybe it's not even about the money. I think sometimes people just want that little bit of extra recognition, that accolade or a good job or whatever too, right? And so if you're on the job site often enough and you're talking with them, I think that's really important. Yeah. I think that my answer probably is not that different from yours, but it's the finish work. And I think that kind of goes along with people just kind of disappearing, or they sort of fizzle out, lose motivation, or whatever that looks like. But getting that last 15% done has been really challenging for us. I don't know. I think we've gotten better at it, but I don't know if we've necessarily solved the issue. Yeah. And it's that last 15% that either makes the house look beautiful versus looking like shit. So.
Right. And when he says finish work, it's, the trim's lined up straight. Paint lines are straight. There's not splash paint everywhere or splash texture on the floor. The wall covers, the plate covers for the switches and the plugs, those are all installed and they're straight. And it's clean.
Yeah. Because I think the end user is always going to look at the finish work, right? And there might not be anything wrong with the house, but if there's a light cover that's missing, it could even be a light bulb. Yeah. Something really minute.
Right. It's silly.
They'll find a way, and I don't disagree with it.
Right.
But they'll find a reason to say, well, if they didn't pay attention to this, that should have been so easy to fix or remedy.
Right.
What else is wrong with the house, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, you and I have seen it a lot.
Yeah.
Stuff that gets listed, the ones that are just, and even if the quality behind the scenes and there was all kinds of issues and it wasn't great, if the finished quality is perfect, that house is easier to sell.
Yeah.
Right.
Subpar material, but it's put together really well, can look more impressive than obviously using something that's really nice and crap execution. So.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. We got a couple questions on here. Let me see. Where were we? Do you ever do things per hours or only per job? I don't like per hour. Again, it's because of the implication, especially with L&I and the state. I don't want to pay for their L&I insurance, their coverage. Yeah. If you're paying per hour, you have an employee, and if you didn't cover the L&I costs and the payroll costs, they can come back, years later and ding you for that, and you have a couple thousand or tens of thousands of dollars in some cases bill for that. So I rather they get paid on their own. I don't want to figure out payroll tax. I issue the 1099 to whether them or their company, and that's the end of it.
So this next question here, this is also something that we went over at the very beginning, but yes, we buy most of our stuff from just Home Depot and Lowe's. We've got some other places that we look at too, like Floor and Decor, maybe Gray Floors.
Yeah.
Some of those places where we're not like constantly out there shopping for materials, but there's a few places that we like going to. I
get faucets, I get lighting, I get that on Amazon. I get cabinet handles on Amazon. Because cabinet handles in particular are, I don't know, $4 or $5 or $10 a handle at like Lowe's and Home Depot, and they're $1 or $3 a handle on Amazon, and it's basically the exact same thing. So, I wouldn't discount Amazon. I would take a look at that for some of this stuff. Trim and doors, we go to a place called A1 Trim and Doors in Kent, even though sometimes I get frustrated with things, but it's more of my own fault than anything else.
And also, too, I'm recording this session, so if you guys want to go back and look at this, This is going to be posted in our group as well. So just go ahead and have a look out for that.
Let's see, we've got...
Guys, we had a good question. Do you have contracts for these jobs?
I don't. Now, this has bitten me before.
Yeah, so what we're saying in this session, we're not necessarily trying to give advice.
Right.
But it's just how we work and we operate. It might be for better or for worse, but I think this is just the system that has worked out well for us. But yeah, give us the pros and cons.
So I know that a lot of people, a lot of professional people who do this properly, have a contract saying you're going to be doing these things, you're going to be doing this work, you're going to be getting paid this amount, right? Up front, everyone knows. Me personally, and this is kind of how I do everything, is I don't want to figure out all that. Like, I don't want to forget to put on the contract that it's supposed to screw in a light bulb or screw in that plate cover, right?
Yeah.
Because now we have a change order and they're going to charge for the change order. I want to work with someone who I can walk through the house and I can say, make this look nice and make this done, right?
Yeah.
And I can show them, this is my other houses that I did. I've done these other things. This is what it looked like. I want you to turn this and make it look like that, right?
Yeah.
And then give me an idea, what is it going to cost to do that? And that we kind of work from there, right? And it's the same thing like with you and I, right?
Yeah.
Patrick and I have no contract or written agreement on how we own our property together. We have no written agreement on how we run the office. I'm working with people who I completely trust with my life even. And in all reality, at the end of the day, if there was some disagreement we had about how something is supposed to, I'm going to go with whatever he wants because I want.
Yeah, and I think that it goes both ways, right? I think that our partnership works and our relationships with whatever contractor works because we actually genuinely care about their best interest as well.
Right.
And those are the types of people that we're working with, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's like you could have a contract in place, but in reality, how are you going to enforce it? I mean, someone can go disappear, they can file for bankruptcy, and that's the end of it.
Am I really going to go to court over this $20,000 bid? No, I'm not. I'm not going to bother. I've been to court once over something stupid, not because I wanted to, because I had to, and I'm not going to go and do that again. It's just such a tedious experience where I'd rather just pay the money and not deal with that person ever again.
You actually told me a funny story about something that you overheard at Starbucks. There were, like, I don't know, investors, flippers or something talking about how, I don't know, whether or not they should go after one of their partners over like $5,000 or something.
Yeah, I remember you talking. I was sitting in Starbucks and I was eavesdropping because I heard something about real estate. I couldn't help myself.
Yeah.
But this person was consulting with a friend of theirs saying, oh, this guy, we only made this much. It's like, and I don't remember the exact details, but it was something so small. Like, it was a $5,000 difference, and they were asking their friend if they thought they should sue over the $5,000 difference when they already made money on this deal, right? Yeah. Like, to me, if we do a deal from the beginning to the end and we lose nothing, great, right? Now we actually made 50 grand. That's beautiful. I am not going to nickel and dime over $5,000, right? Like, the fact that we got through it and unscathed and we've made money, that's enough. And if someone's willing to work with me and they brought something of value to that deal, I'm not going to go and tell them I need you to pay the extra $5 grand so we're completely even. No, I value long-term relationship over one-time relationship. So if that means I made $5,000 less, it doesn't matter. I made whatever I made already. We made money on this. We kept our people working, and everyone benefited from this transaction. So, and it's just not worth fighting over something so small.
Yeah. So we're getting close to the end here, right at that 45-minute mark here. Does anyone have any additional questions here before we wrap up?
Let's see.
And I think we got to everyone's questions, but and again, you guys can ask anything. If you want our opinion on how much we would pay for something, you can go ahead and ask it here in the chat. But if there is nothing else, actually there is a question or something came up here.
Where have you found the most reliable contractors?
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth, yeah. I want to know that these people have done something for somebody that I know already and it went well before I just kind of go blindly and work with someone brand new. I'd like to at least have an idea of what their work looks like.
Yeah.
Right. So occasionally I'll go try stuff. For the most part, yeah, I work off of referrals of people who have already worked with them. So that being said, it doesn't always mean that they do a great job for me either. And vice versa. Almost always, when I've referred people I work with to someone else, they go and botch everything and make me look like a complete idiot. So I've basically stopped referring out anybody for the most part, except for HVAC, because he's perfect and awesome in every way. Carpet, I refer out, even though he might not even want to do the work for most people anymore.
Yeah.
And what else was it? It was carpet. It was the HVAC, tile. I have a tile sub who is excellent. And I refer him to everybody because I know he's going to show up and do a great job.
So the next question is average price per square foot these days. This is not straightforward, right? And we were talking about this before we got on the Zoom.
Yeah, the last flip we just sold, it was $81 a square foot.
But this was a small house.
Yeah.
And, this is the perfect example why this doesn't work out because, for example, what we spent in that kitchen, whether it was an 1,100 square foot house or a 3,000 square foot house, we would have spent the same amount, right?
Yeah, same kitchen.
So
we added a bathroom in this. So there was a house we spent around $90,000 on a remodel. And the house was 1,100 square feet around there, right?
Yeah. Small
Rambler. Now we added a bathroom, completely added a bathroom out of nowhere. We added a laundry utility room. Now, we didn't add on to the house physically. We just rearranged some things where we added the space. And then we did a new driveway on a pretty long driveway.
Yeah.
So those 3 items alone added up to be quite a bit, where I would say generally on our cosmetic flips, we're probably between 60 and 70 a square foot, if that, right? On this one, we were a little higher because we did some high-ticket items extra.
Yeah.
But like to your point, that same $11,000 kitchen would have went in that 1,100 square foot house or the 3,000 square foot house.
Yeah, that same driveway, same thing, right?
Same driveway, same. A lot of that stuff it doesn't translate well per square foot sometimes.
How do you keep track of the financials for each project?
So, I have a funny story actually. I was diagnosed with severe ADHD about a year and a half ago. So
he went through his whole life undiagnosed, basically.
I mean, we all knew.
We all knew.
I had a spreadsheet for each property, right? And one day I showed Patrick one of the spreadsheets, and he had no fucking idea what was going on in the spreadsheet, right? And I took.
And I think I had just like a really simple question about where the money was going, or I don't know, like, and not that I was worried, but we just wanted to see where the money was.
We needed to catch up and figure out where everything was at.
Yeah.
And the way I had done this spreadsheet, like I got Adderall for the first time, right? And one of the first things I did was I took all these stupid spreadsheets. I made one spreadsheet for every property. So I opened my one spreadsheet. I've got like 16 projects on there. It's a simple. This is the date, this is how much I spent, and this is what it was for, right? Yeah. Then I have the address above it, I have a running total calculated already, and that's it. So it's like 5 or 6 lines on each property, right? Now it's perfect, like anyone can open that right now and know exactly what we've spent, right?
Yeah.
Whereas this other spreadsheet, I almost have no idea what I was trying to do with this. I was trying to make it auto-calculate stuff and move things around, and like, I'm putting negative number for this and positive number for that. It just makes no sense, right?
Yeah.
But no, it's a very simple spreadsheet. Like I said, date, the amount, and a line item of what it is. So every single day when stuff gets spent, I do a lot of phone sale. The second if the dollar is spent, I'm logging it on a text thread with my bookkeeper and my assistant, and it says X amount of dollars at X store for X property. And that's what my text thread says. And sent to 2 other people, and they all have access to my spreadsheet, so we can add it on there. And then the bookkeeper does the QuickBooks part.
We kind of touched on this, but are you a GC or do you hire GCs?
I am a GC, and there was a law that went into place 5-6 years ago that said if you're flipping a house or if you're remodeling a house for a rental, you have to be a general contractor. Even if I'm hiring a GC, I still have to be a general contractor.
Yeah.
So that I am a GC. I have an insurance. I have a bond, and it's kind of stupid, but that's something I've got.
Carter had a question. How much profit do you aim for per job site? I don't think that there's an exact number. I think that really it depends on if it's worth mobilizing your entire crew.
Yeah,
right?
$100,000 minimum is what we shoot for, and the reason is not because we scoff at a $50,000 profit, because that's a great profit, but $100,000 profit allows for you to absorb things that you might have missed.
Yeah.
And right now a big one is the market condition, right? Yeah. Where I'm generally conservative on an ARV to begin with, but if you are wrong on your resale price, when you do a price reduction, that's not a few $100s. You do a price reduction on a listing, that's $20,000 or $30,000 if you want to do it properly, right? So we need to have enough margin to be able to take that hit. If we think that this house can sell for $550, and who knows what's going to happen if it ends up selling for $450, at least we broke even, right?
Yeah.
So let me see. How do you know if a job site is worth the investment? Well, yeah, same thing. I guess that's really same type of question. Is it worth the investment well, I guess that's a different question, because we might make $100,000 on something, but what if it takes 3 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We kind of touched on this kind of thing in one of these other videos where there's projects that just dragged on, where one, I made 50 grand on it over 3 years, but to make that $50,000, I spent 300 and some $1,000 over the course of the 3-year period.
Yeah.
That's not worth it. Like, I could have bought anything else at that point, right?
Yep.
And probably made more than $50,000. So
yeah. So is it worth mobilizing your entire crew?
Right.
And
Exactly what
money,
you said.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you guys break down the costs you're seeing right now for major items in a cosmetic flip? So kitchen, bath, floors, etc.
So it's interesting with all of the inflation stuff going on. There's one thing that's been relatively constant is the kitchen cabinets and the countertops. Mm-hmm. I think on a kitchen generally, and now keep in mind we're working with the entry-level homes and the medium-priced homes, and we're working on stuff generally under 3,000 square feet, and we're, for the most part, South King County, North Pierce County. So we're not doing stuff in Mercer Island or Bellevue. We're doing just regular average homes. A kitchen's generally costing between $10,000 and $11,000. So we're probably in cabinets and countertops $7,000 or $8,000. We're probably in appliances $2,000 to $3,000. Now appliances have jumped up a bit. A couple years ago, we could buy a Whirlpool set, and that's going to be dishwasher, electric stove, side-by-side refrigerator, and an over-the-range microwave. That would be under $2,300 before, right? If you do it on a sale time, they're about $1,800. We buy in volume, so we usually get a good amount off. But that same set is almost $3,000 now. So the biggest thing that's changed has been the appliances, I think.
Flooring.
Bathroom flooring, I mean, we do LVP a lot. Yeah. LVP, we're under $4 a square foot generally with any kind of pad that needs to be on it. And then we're, the guy who's been installing it lately, he's usually, whatever he ends up giving me a bid on, it generally breaks down to about $300 a day for the most part. And he'll bang out a floor in about 2 or 3 days. So I'd say it's maybe $1 or so, maybe a little more per square foot on the install. My tiler has always been reasonable. I don't know how he comes up with the price. He just goes and looks at it and says, I want this much. And then lately I've been giving a little extra. So he's been happy about that. But, for a bathroom tile job, tile surround, shower surround, tile floor, I'm usually $3,000, $3,500 for a shower. That's labor. That's not material. But the tile itself, it's not too expensive for the most part. We're not doing marble or anything crazy. We're just doing, average tiles, which I think the tiles generally break down to less than $3 a square foot too.
What do you think is an appropriate? how much do you think is appropriate to pay for a roof?
This is another big one that's changed a lot, right? So the roofing material has gone up. I think almost every 3 months it's gone up considerably, where the material alone is probably double what it was 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So you go to a roofer, a roofing company, on like an average one-story house, they might quote you $10,000 or $11,000 for a roof that they would have quoted you 8 or 9, even 7,000 before, right? So, I mean, generally, I think the last roof we did, I spent $8,000 on it. That was labor, that was material, that was tear off. So we got a pretty good deal.
Are you doing your own dumping?
They use my dump truck.
Okay.
So that's something to take into consideration. I have my own dump truck. I'll have someone go back it in to the driveway. They throw everything in the dump truck, and it's either 1 or 2 loads. Roofing loads are some of the heaviest loads we do.
Wow.
And dumping a roof on an average home, even 1-story, 2-story house, we're usually looking at about $1,200-$1,500 in dumping fees alone, because it's just the roofing material is heavy.
Yeah.
And when they got to do the plywood too, that's really heavy.
So the next question that came up was, and we really have to be wrapping up now, but the next question is kind of in line with the last one, but how much would you pay for a total full remodel, just the labor? I don't know. I think it's hard to kind of divvy that up. I think we're generally 50-50 with labor and materials. I think on, so you could do the math on your own, but I think on cosmetic rehabs, 60 to 80,000, I think is a number that jumps out a lot at me. Yeah. When we start adding in structural components, anywhere from 100 to 120 is a number that kind of jumps out a lot at me. And then again, we're roughly 50-50 there, right? You're
talking about structural, that's because you're used to deal with fire damaged houses, but
that's true.
I think so. Let me think about this for a minute. The last one we're working on right now, we actually are really good on cost. I think we're going to be under $60,000
Bonnie Lake
on a cosmetic job in Tacoma.
Okay.
Yeah, the one in Tacoma. And that was something we intended to be a rental, but we ended up finding a property we liked better, so we bought that. We're going to keep that instead. We're going to actually sell this other house, but we're going to end up being probably under 60, or maybe right around there when we take. We're going to do the landscaping a little nicer because it's going to be resold, but. And that place is a 4-bed. It was a 1.5 bath. We added a shower.
Yeah.
Rather than using old cabinets, we're redoing the kitchen, so that bumped it up a little bit. But if we had just done for the rental, we would have ended up around 40, 45, I think.
Yeah, and I guess to be fair, so the last few projects that we got off of, they were fire damaged homes. In reality, they should have just been torn down. And so that really added to that extra cost. But I think that's, I think your assessment is fair.
Yeah, so we're about 60 into a very simple cosmetic job in Tacoma. Actually, there's a little more. We leveled out some floor. This has a post and pier foundation. Yeah. Some of them were not very level. I mean, this included cutting open the floor and leveling stuff out a little bit, which that's something that can add up depending on who you're working with. But because I've done this a few times, I saw what the foundation companies do. This is another thing where, actually, I talked with this about someone yesterday where they just ran a sewer line for the first time for themselves for their Dadu project. Mm-hmm. And it's, when I first did that, I used to think that some of these things were these great, huge, super precise feats of engineering that have to be done, and specialized people need to do it, and they have specialized equipment. They don't. They dig a trench, they throw the pipe in, and if the water drains, then that's for the most part it, right? Yeah. Same with electrical stuff. I used to think they had all these specialized tools to make sure they get the wire in just right, but they don't. You shove the goddamn wire in as hard as you can, and it's messy usually. Like Ryan in here in the group, you and I ran that service line for my building, and all we did was stand in a trench for a couple hours and just shove the goddamn wire through, and by the time we were done, we were both completely filthy, and that was it. That was all it took. It was just muscling the wire in. So, no, getting back to the foundation, I know what these people do when they level the stuff out. You use bottle jacks. They add posts where they need to go. They add beams where they need to go, and that's really it. So we
Yeah.
took our bottle jacks, we leveled out the floor, and it took us, I think, 2 days, 3 days, but it was perfectly level by the time we were done, and that was it. It's completely acceptable, and it's completely passable repair. So
Yeah.
rather than pay a foundation company like I don't know, I can't remember the Matvey or whoever who's going to come out and say we need to add all this stuff for $30,000, we went and we did it on our own,
Yeah.
and it's perfectly fine now. And I'm anyone who goes and inspects it now is going to say the same thing, that it's completely acceptable repair. So that being said, there are times when you can save money on things where someone might try and convince you that it takes a specialized person or tool, and it doesn't.
Yeah.
So, but that just comes along with experience, I think.
So I just want to make a quick plug before we wrap up here. So we are real estate investors, but we also own a real estate office as well. So we're licensed real estate agents. I know a lot of you guys in the group had questions about whether or not it's worth having a license. We have about 40 agents in our office, and half of them are investors. And they have the license to supplement their investing or just make it a little bit easier. We're a low-cost brokerage, and in fact, we kind of despise the traditional brokerage model. So we're low cost. We're $100 a month. Our average transaction fee is about $400 a month. So if you're looking a deal, yes. And so if you're looking for an office that's fairly economical and you're surrounded by people who are doing the things that you want to be doing, come talk to us, and we'd like to get you on board as well. So I think that's it for me.
Yeah, that's it. There's no other questions, and I think that's all we got for you today.
Great. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Bye.